let's make this relevant to the American people. From our own national security interest, a Sunni-Shia conflict of great depth and breadth is not good for us. Do we all agree with that? If you could, Dr. Rand, in 30 seconds, tell me why.
Sure. A great regional divide that's sectarian in nature will play out in the worst possible way. We're seeing it in Syria and Iraq. You see it in Lebanon, elsewhere. So it will lead to conflict. It will lead to de-democratization. It will lead to weakening of states and leadership, and the inability of central states to address the economic and political demands of their people.
Well, will it lead to higher gas prices?
Potentially. It depends which way the conflicts go.
Will it make it harder to do business throughout the world?
Potentially,
right?
Yes. Crisis.
Okay. When it comes to Syria, do any of you believe we have a plan in place that will destroy ISIL in Syria in the next 3 years?
There is no plan in place that would achieve that in the next 3 years, sir, in my view.
Does everyone agree with that?
I might take slight exception. I think that the plan laid out by Chairman Dempsey before this committee theoretically could do so in about 2 to 5 years. I don't know if I'd put it to 3. But it has to be properly resourced, and it has to be properly implemented. And there, I don't see the same.
1 to 10, what's the likelihood of this plan working in the next 3 years?
Again, Senator, that depends on how well the United States pursues it. Given what we're doing now, I'd give it about a 2.
Okay. All right. What happens the day after? Well, do you all agree that no Arab army, if we could ever form one, is going to go into Syria and just fight ISIL and leave Assad in charge?
I would completely agree with that, Senator.
Everybody agree with that?
I think it's a complete mistake to think that we can build a Syrian opposition army that will only fight Daesh. They will not.
Okay. Everybody agree with that?
Sir, I also think that we need the Turkish government on side for that.
Right, and they're not going to get involved if you leave Assad in power.
Absolutely correct.
Because you're giving Syria to the Iranians if you leave Assad in power, right?
For the long haul, yes, sir.
Okay. Now, from an American point of view, if Syria is not resolved in the next 3 to 5 years, do you worry about our allies in Lebanon and Jordan?
Yes.
Could they be one of the victims of a protracted civil war in Syria?
Absolutely. They're already suffering from the spillover of that civil war.
And I think it leads to radicalization of the Sunni community, because Syria is a great incubator for radicalizing the Sunni community because of the level of slaughter there, which destabilizes all the other places, particularly the neighboring countries.
Do you agree that the terrorist organizations that are operating in Syria and Iraq, Yemen, if they're not dealt with more effectively, we could get hit here at home? The likelihood of an attack is going up on the homeland.
Sir, I think there's intent and there's capability to strike not only the Western European targets, but U.S. targets in the homeland. That will increase over time, undoubtedly.
So the more foreign fighters that flow into Syria and Iraq to help ISIL and other organizations makes it more difficult for us to prevent the next attack, because some of them have passports that could work their way back here, right?
Affirmative.
Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about Iran. Without a nuclear weapon, do you agree with me that Iran is wreaking havoc in the region?
Correct.
Yes.
Everybody agrees with that.
I would agree, Senator, but I would also say that I think we're allowing them to wreak havoc in the region.
I couldn't agree with it more, but
Could I say Dr. Rand may want to...
yes,
I want
please.
to clarify that. I would not call it wreaking havoc. I would say increasing its interventionism and its expansionism.
Okay.
Sir, I think they're taking advantage, they're creating disorder in order to enhance their ability to intervene and offer themselves as a solution.
Would you agree with me that if they had more money, they would be they wouldn't build hospitals and schools with it if the current regime had more money?
Sir, even under the constrained times they've probably provided over $4 billion to subsidize the Syrian government in the last 18 months.
So the idea that if sanctions were lifted and you infused their economy with more money, do you agree with me more likely than not some of that money, if not most of it, would go to destabilizing the region?
I don't know how they apportion their budget, but I suspect there'll be
Well,
more.
if past behavior is any indication of future action, the answer would be yes.
I agree with that, yeah.
I mean, we don't really know because there's a great demand by the people of Iran.
But we know what they're doing now.
Right, but the sanctions relief might be funneled to respond to the demands of the people for, you know.
Well, but I don't know how much influence the Iranian people have over their own budget. But here's what I'm saying. The likelihood of more money in the hands of this regime, to me, creates more possibility for destabilization unless they change their behavior. Finally, is there a moderate hardline divide in Iran, in your view, that is meaningful?
Sir, I said in my opening comments that there really is not a divide that is meaningful to the outcomes that we're interested in here today. The hardliners have a lock on the levers of power there, Codes Force and the hardliners in the Council of Guardians and elsewhere. A moderate voice is, I think, not really hopeful of emerging in that country.
Do you all generally agree with that?
I see a wide division of views within Iran, but I do agree with Colonel Harvey that at the end of the day, I think that the supreme leader is the one who calls the shots, and he has tended to move Iran in a direction mostly consistent with the hardline viewpoint.
I would just say there are diversity of views, but on core security issues, I think there's more consensus than disagreement.
I would just add that if you look at the speeches of Rouhani and Zarif, you see greater pragmatism than some of their other colleagues in the government.
Yeah, and their speeches and their action, and the assembly of experts apparently is now in the hand of a pretty tough dude. Last question, over my time. Do you all agree that a bad deal with Iran would manifest itself with a Arab breakout in terms of their nuclear desires, that the worst possible outcome with a deal with the Iranians is to create a nuclear arms race in the Mideast where the Arabs felt like they needed to have a nuclear weapon of their own?
I think we will see proliferation of nuclear technologies in the region, not necessarily nuclear weapons, but perhaps other countries trying to experiment with enrichment capacity or plutonium plants. I think we will see some sort of a proliferation of that as Sunni Arab states try to match Iran's nuclear capabilities.